Hello, all of my favorite dinks out there. Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to Humpday Happy Hour. It's another terrific Wednesday, and we are so happy to be with all of you. Welcome to Humpday Happy Hour with Dentist in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It is live. And it is over a cocktail. And even though it was a it wasn't a great attempt at a dry January, but I'm doing the best I can. I went back to bourbon tonight. It was that kind of a day, kind of needed it. And I'm happy to be with all of you. And so are my best friends in the world, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. As you know, we are all business owners, we are all dentists, and we are all practice owners. And guess what our job is? Our job is to bring all of you in the know, and we are happy to do it. I think what we need to do now is share some news with all of our viewers. So, JB, you got some news for us?
Yeah, of course, always. One must do their homework, right? Okay, so I have quite a bit to share tonight. None of it will take very long, but I do want to run over a few big stories that came out over the week. We're going to start with the real low points first because I've been told on numerous occasions that I bring up terrible news on a regular basis. And so we're just going to start with something good first. We're going to go there and then we will move on to things that are happier. So first off, in the world of dentistry, it seems like every week now I get to read a story about a dentist that maybe made a crappy decision. Well, no difference this week. We had a pediatric dentist who was arrested in Georgia on child pornography charges. We don't know much else about the case, but certainly that was shocking to the community, probably to the patients and the patients' families as well. So we'll keep you posted if anything comes of that. Obviously, you're innocent until proven guilty, but still, in any community, that would be kind of shocking to read about. One of the news articles that came out this week that I thought, as a member of the Dental Practice Council of the AGD and a group that is focused heavily on issues that are going to directly affect dentists, practicing and expenses and regulatory issues that are coming their way. This story came up this week. If you haven't seen it, the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is proposing a new rule that would improve access to equipment for people with disabilities. This includes dental chairs, dental radiography equipment. So if you have a Pano or a CBCT machine, how a person accesses that in a wheelchair, or if they have other debilitating issues where they have to use walkers or that type of thing for support. I'm all for making things accessible, and I definitely want to continue to be mindful of access to care. But I have to tell you, in reading the regulatory language that's coming out from this, I'm a little worried. First off, I certainly expect that means when this is passed, that all future equipment that you purchase will have to have that into consideration. So dental chairs will have options to be adjustable and accessible for patients to come in to your office, and radiography equipment, other things that might be dental specific or related, whatever that might be in your office. We already have accessible bathrooms and those types of things that have been put into working order. The bigger concern that I have is the rate at which this new rule might go into effect and how much they expect to happen and how quickly. So, the questions that will always come up from something like this is, does it mean that all dentists will need to be replacing out a certain number of chairs? What will be that quota? So if you have an operatory or a business that has 8 operatories, how many of those have to be ADA compliant for accessibility? If you have a CBCT machine or a Pano machine currently in operation, how long do you have before that will be ADA compliant? And so there's a lot of pretty stern language, I think, in this initial outlay for the rules that might be required for dental offices to be compliant. Now, there is a public comment period, and that will end on February 12th. So if you feel passionate about this particular topic or would like to be engaged and watch what other individuals are discussing and putting forth, and that would be the time to do it. But there is some concern, I think, over just the general enforcement. What does this look like? Additionally, the proposed rule states that equipment that you buy must be accessible until they have the required number of pieces. So again, how many of your ops have to be accessible? It can't just be one op. It can't just be one maybe pano machine. And staff would have to have required training for that. If states and local entities are denying dental and medical services because they don't have the accessible equipment to service that patient, they are proposing fines and regulatory authority on those entities. So there's a lot of language in this particular rule, a lot to digest. It is a pretty significant change in how we're currently operating. So one, I know the Dental Practice Council will be discussing that this weekend. I'm sure the ADA will also be watching this pretty closely and having an opportunity for comment. But we should also stay engaged because it could very much directly impact what our offices look like. If you're planning for expansion or for adding operatories, you certainly might want to be watching this pretty closely as well. Lastly, on a more personal note, wanted to remind everyone that Dentists in the Know is one of the last two finalists for Influencer of the Year with Dr. Bicuspid for a Cuspy Award. So if you haven't had an opportunity to vote yet, we'll make sure we include that in the link in the podcast.
Would you just repeat that one more time?
I can. Dentist in the Know is one of the two finalists for Influencer of the Year through Dr. Bicuspid's Cuspy Awards. I will provide links in the podcast and YouTube channels as well as on tonight's live show. So if you haven't had a chance to vote yet, or if you wouldn't mind voting again so that can be counted towards the final count, we would really greatly appreciate it. It was such an honor to receive it in 2023. And we would be gratefully honored again to receive it in 2024. And on that note, might I also mention that Dentists in the Know, this is a big announcement, guys. This is huge. We will have a booth at Chicago Midwinter. That's right. We will have our own space. We'll be doing on-site live podcasting with some of our favorite past and future guests, we hope. Many of our friends in the industry and other dentists and colleagues that'll be roaming around. So if you happen to be at Chicago this year, I believe we're 1205 or 1206 booth number. I need to check it. I think it's 1206. We're right across from the podcasting hub, and you can find us there. We'll also be hanging out at the Podcasters Hub with some of our fellow podcasters as well. But you can find us on the floor of Chicago Midwinter. Come hang out. We've got some really cool giveaways. It's going to feel like a mini cocktail hump day happy hour all day on Thursday and Friday. So please do stop by. This is a big opportunity for dentists to really showcase, Dentists in the Know, to really kind of showcase what we're all about. So, and with that, that's the news.
So I get to introduce our guest, and it's a real honor. A couple years ago, if any of you have been to the AARD, you kind of know what it's all about. It's kind of the who's who in the intellectual educational world of dentistry. A bunch of fantastic speakers, presenters, great table clinics. It's just an absolute wonderful experience. And a couple years ago, I heard this gentleman that I'm about to introduce speak on digital dentures, which is really a paradigm shift in dentistry. And it's something that I've always been fascinated with. In my opinion, there's very few people that have made this successful or a successful part of their practice. It's not as easy as you would think it would be. Everything digital is not always easy, but people sometimes seem to think that it's supposed to be. Anyways, this guy has been a master of that. He's been a master of many things digital. He is a board-certified prosthodontist. He practices in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I won't hold that against him, but woo pig, suey, whatever you're supposed to say. I was a Hogs fan growing up. He's also a surgical prosthodontist and a digital laboratory technician. So this guy encompasses all things dentistry, all things digital. As you all know, if you watched a few weeks ago, I'm a little jealous because I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have pursued prosthodontics. But this is Dr. Andrew Johnson from Northwest Arkansas. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to join us, and glad you're here, man.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I'm really happy to spend some time with you guys, and looking forward to getting into it.
So as we get started, I kind of want to hit on this a little bit because in our email exchange today, the connection was brought back to mind. I know that years ago we did a webinar together, and we were all like, you were in the hustle and bustle of practice. I don't even know if you remember this. There were like 3 or 4 of us presenting, and we're all sitting there in suits and ties. And man, you're in scrubs, dude. You're like, I got a patient in the next room. I'm gonna be on. Boom, boom, boom. And it was just so solid and everything. And then you reminded me that I had approached you at AARD, and I was like, oh my God, that's right. I don't think I brought 2 and 2 together. But tell us a little bit about AARD, and I think it would be an honor to present there, but tell us about how that was. I know from what I hear, it's not only an honor, but it's kind of very intimidating. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, yeah, I would say, maximal measures of both honor and intimidation. I think that, having done, my fair share of, lectures, presentations, study clubs, podium stuff. Not to say that I hold myself out as some like master presenter by any means, but to your point earlier, getting on board with certain technologies earlier on and kind of, beating my head against the wall or the computer screen until it started to work out, and kind of cultivating a few systems and workflows that I think, are gradually making more and more sense to the masses as this technological wave actually takes over. Kind of put me in a position to kind of have everything coming together all at once for that presentation for the Restorative Academy. So the American Academy of Restorative Dentistry is a long-standing meeting society, membership-only club. Meets during the Chicago Midwinter Week every year in Chicago. But it is. You look around this room when you go there, and the first time I ever went there was when I was a resident at Tennessee. And you walk into this ballroom, and it's fancy and snazzy, and you got this like $80 suit on because you don't have any money, and somebody else paid your tuition to be there. But you're looking at that guy that wrote a book, and that guy that wrote a book, and that guy that's got his DVD series, and all these things, all these influential people that are, dental famous. But it's pretty special to be now, increasingly kind of on the inside of that. And then, to kind of get the nod earlier on to get up there and actually talk and show, my stuff in front of that crowd. I mean, it's one thing to stand up in front of a study club and like sweat a little bit, which I actually used to do and sometimes still do. But when I was standing in the back of that room before I went up on that stage, I was literally checking my pulse because I thought I was going to die before I got up there. It was so nerve-wracking. It's one of those things where you kind of black out and then you hear about what you did afterwards. But it was a really rewarding experience, and so honored to have been given that opportunity. And even more rewarding is, engaging in the conversations and the feedback and the networking and the relationship building that comes from, exposing what it is that you're all about to, the world, essentially bringing your good ideas, laying them bare, and having people either turn their noses up or, reach their hands out to shake yours.
It is phenomenal when you kind of reach that turning point in your career where you kind of feel like you're giving valuable information back to the profession. And I was sitting next to Dr. Eric Rindler, who's a periodontist out of San Antonio. I don't know if you know Eric very well, but Eric looks at me and he goes, "This guy's good." And I was like, yeah, this is good stuff. He's like, "Yeah, this is kind of your jam, isn't it?" So it was very good and very rewarding. So I'm sorry, guys. I've monopolized the night so far. Y'all go ahead.
Oh, are we here?
I don't know. Are you?
Is this thing working? Jeff, is yours working? Okay. I'm just kidding.
Do you hear the tapping?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm tapping with my middle finger. It's working.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Drew, I would love to hear more about you said part of your journey that getting involved in the new digital technology, sort of beating your head against the wall. And that's definitely a common theme that we've heard from multiple folks that we've had on the show that are now leading the industry in education in certain areas, because they sat there and went through the painstaking process for 2 years, 3 years without really good training, support from manufacturers, because you were sort of trying to break the mold. Like, talk to us a little bit about what was it that you were trying to break the mold on? What were you working through? What were some of those painstaking moments that you had that ultimately has sort of led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I mean, specifically within like the lane of the denture process. I mean, having finished a prosthodontic residency, and I've got a lab technician certification. I actually enjoyed lab work. I was that guy that did all your wax rims and your wax setups for your cases in dental school in the back room for $20, that sort of thing. But I always liked the handiwork, the arts and crafts of it all mixed with the science, and then the human management of it all. And honestly, I think that, as far as cosmetic dentistry being rewarding, the before and after stuff, there's no bigger impact than like no teeth to teeth.
Mm-hmm.
No veneer can do that, in my opinion. But getting out there in the real world, it was a unfortunately slow realization that doing the things that I actually enjoyed doing and wanted to, hang my hat on and be known for doing a good job, AKA dentures and then overdentures and all the implant work that graduates it up the ladder. Man, I was driving myself into the ground, because I was a network with every, insurance that you could imagine as a new grad. And, the more dentures you do, it's not just as simple as being busy and having butts in the chair and, having your hands in the mouth. Because when you spend time as a dentist doing a denture, I calculated it all out, and you end up making 25 cents on the dollar comparing that minute to any other procedural expenditure of that minute, like fillings, crowns, even hygiene checks, when it comes down to the profitability of it all. When you factor in the lab bills and the number of appointments and the chair time obligation, and then the follow-ups and the adjustments, and then the bad for business, reverse word of mouth marketing that happens even when you don't charge for the 12th adjustment. It's not really coming across the bridge table super favorably. So dentures was, not a good thing for me, even though I wanted it to be a fun part of my practice. I kind of was forced to either do it differently or stop doing it. I was going to send my kids to college on MODs before I ever sent them to college on dentures. So I, took on some digital technology in those days. Like, companies like Avident were the first digital denture solutions out there, and kind of getting on board with that really, really early, understanding, how to manipulate scan data and align things, and what kind of information matters and what kind of information doesn't matter. I think it really hinders dentists that jump into dentures, and then now they do them digitally. They think they need all the same stuff and to have to do it in all the same order of events, and it really doesn't apply the same way. I mean, we can be completely differently, or think completely differently in terms of our systematic approach to dentures that can not only make it faster and more profitable and more predictable, but actually more fun, more rewarding, more involving of your patient, rather than taking away like the wax try-in step of most digital dentures, if you guys have ever tried one, is a far cry from what the value of that step was in dental school when we set them up in wax rims, and now we have pink gums and white teeth, and we can actually move the midline if Miss Jones doesn't like it. But with a digital one, you're locked in. It's all white top to bottom. It's a solid piece of plastic. The bite's off. The occlusal plane is tilted. They don't like the midline. You're screwed. What are you going to do? Most of us just like make some notes and say, hey, lab guy, make the following 19 changes and send me a final denture. I'll explain to Miss Jones that it looks great. We kind of pawn it off on, maintaining some semblance of profitability in an otherwise still rather expensive process. So, what I've done is kind of take a step back, having had my hands on all kinds of scanners and all these things, and been familiar with that stuff for a long time. And now I look at it through a different lens. I don't necessarily try to hold myself out there as the most scientific or smartest or most successful dentist in the world, but I try to think, what is actually impacting the results? And the results have two perspectives. It's the results for me, it's the results for my patient. And in some ways they're the same, but in a lot of ways they're different. I have to be profitable, but also good enough to where I don't cause myself more problems. And my patients have to like the result, but also like the process and maybe benefit from some of the technologies that we're substituting along the way. So I think looking at dentures differently and basically doing them, what I say is backwards compared to what we're trained to do, has really helped my practice and helped my patient's opinion on what it is I'm doing for them.
So Drew, tell us about the border molding step, because that's always the thing that people talk about. How can you make a digital denture? I mean, as many digital impressions as most of us have taken, and we know what a really good border molded impression looks like. And we know that we cannot do that digitally at this point. And most people who work in the digital realm have some kind of an amalgamation of digital plus analog. So tell us about the border molding step for you, because I know that's what everybody wants to know as far as denture fabrication.
I mean, that's a great question, Jeff. And I think that that is on the minds of everybody that thinks that they're just going to jump in and start doing dentures with computers and scanners. Is they're just going to stick this scanner in somebody's mouth, and then they're going to email somebody, and then a denture is going to show up in the mail and it's going to go right in the mouth. Well, no, it doesn't work exactly like that. I mean, there may be a system like that in the future, but you're right to point out the fact that, it's one thing to scan a crown prep or an implant scan body and get, really truly down to the micron accurate surface data so that we can produce something. But dentures are built on soft tissue. I mean, even the attached keratinized tissue is soft tissue, but the borders of the denture are the downfall of the scanners. So, you could, the best you can do with a scanner with direct intraoral scans is get decent, either over or under extended master impressions with a scanner. And usually it's pretty raggedy at the edge because that's where things are moving around and it really confuses the scanners. You got to turn the AI tools off. You got to use these weird retractors. You got to gag people and stretch their faces out just to get some decent borders to it. And then essentially the best you can do is overextend the data and then do some sort of myostatic outline, arbitrary, border design. I found that having tried to do that for a long, long time, I would spend, 10 to 15 minutes torturing somebody with this intraoral scanner just to turn around and then arbitrarily design a denture that I'd have to reline or adjust the bejesus out of. So what I do is I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're still doing impressions, not because I think, I'm stuck in the old school mindset, but I can take an impression in about 2 minutes and then I can scan it in about 30 seconds and that impression goes in the trash can because the data is now in the computer and the impression was a means to an end, a better end, because now we are statically placing dynamic displaceable tissue on those borders, all the muscle trimming, border molding, all that stuff, even the soft palatal drape, all those things can be captured. And now we can scan that in a much more efficient and accurate way because I'm scanning, solid material in my hand in a dry, controlled environment. And I'm getting it done faster. I'm getting it done better. And I'm also not even doing that in the same order of events. I mean, that comes in later. That comes in after, say, the try-in in the way I approach these things. So I don't even necessarily need master impressions before, say, I show somebody a new smile. We can kind of glom it all together and stir the pot differently and get a better product out the other side.
That is what I meant by, I think what I probably meant to say earlier is wrapping your head around digital is harder for dentists to do because you kind of find your pathway to make it successful. And I love that you're taking the traditional impression, scanning the traditional impression. And I loved what you said. Repeat it, please, because I want to be able to repeat this static impression of dynamic. What was it that you said?
No, let's. You're going to make me quote myself. I'm going to screw it up too.
Yeah. Well, you're taking something dynamic and moving it into static.
Yes, and that's it. It's very hard to capture that digitally, and that's the vision that most people have in mind when they're thinking, I'm going to take an impression for a digital denture, So my question goes towards the end product, based upon what you just told us. What are what are your thoughts on the various 3D printed options as far as dentures are concerned?
Well, I mean, that's a great thing to point out too, because that is constantly evolving and has evolved very rapidly just in, say, the last year alone. But let me rewind. I mean, the first like digital CAD CAM denture I ever did was the first denture I ever did out of dental school in 2013. And okay, no, I never trained on it in school. That wasn't a thing. There wasn't a class. That wasn't even a paper we read and even tried to test out. So, you know, it's a real world learn on the fly type of thing. And I've always focused on the process because I've recognized that the products are always going to be changing. I'm not a material scientist. I'm not developing all this stuff. I'm going to use whatever I believe to be the best stuff at the time to produce a denture out of. I mean, for the longest time, it's been PMMA that was processed and hand packed and then pressure packed in pneumatic presses and then injection molded and sometimes microwaved. And now it's milled and milled and milled for the last 10 years. But now we're transitioning into these photopolymers that come out of 3D printers. And only recently have there been some really, really high quality, like high impact base and tooth resins that I have now transitioned from glorified temporary dentures now to, you know, final dentures that I stamp my practice brand on and I stand behind. And I think that having looked at those, you know, probably 100 arches in the mouth over the last year and a half, I've been doing those. Out of those new updated materials, I see no more problems with any sort of fracture, staining, any issue with the dentures themselves. But I know for a fact that if there ever is an issue, I can reproduce it effectively, efficiently, and economically, as well as maybe, you know, if it's the next year, I'll make it out of something else because all I have to do is recycle that same data file and make it out of something that now is the latest and greatest at the time.
I like that. I like that answer. I had an issue a while back, and this is going back 3 years, but I had a patient that kept popping teeth out of his denture. And I mean, it was a 3D printed denture, and it was the right side, it was the left side, it was the front, and it was just like, oh my God. I mean, I just wanted to bang my head against a wall. So one day he comes in, and this was a transitional denture, and it was 3D printed. And he comes in, and I'm going to repair it, but I'm going to repair it with acrylic because I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do. I'm not going to super glue it in place. I just got to fix it. So I put it in hot water, and as I pull it out of hot water, the whole left side pops out. And I realized that every time it got into hot water, and I had no idea what the material was because it was lab fabricated, every time it went into hot water, it became very malleable, and the teeth would start popping out. And so I asked him what he was doing, and he said that he would rinse it off in really hot water every morning, and then he'd go drink coffee, and he likes his coffee really hot. And right then is when the teeth would pop out. And I'm like, all right, this is what's going on, dude.
Well, that's no fun, no good.
Yeah.
But I mean, what did you end up doing? Did you end up saying, hey, make me the same denture out of some different stuff? Don't use that stuff again? What'd you do?
No, he was transitioning to a hybrid prosthesis. So,
Okay.
you know, once we got into that, the thing was trash anyways. So,
Yeah.
but I was so thankful to get rid of it. And I called the lab, and I was like, hey, you know, this is what's going on. And I was like, I'm just really frustrated. I'm trying to figure this out. And the lab goes, oh yeah, there was a spell that we went through for about 6 months where teeth kept popping out of the dentures. And it's because every time they heated up, that they would become malleable and the teeth were popping out of the denture. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm kind of stuck in that spell. Oh, we'll remake it for you. And I was like, oh, why don't you just give me a discount on the prosthesis? Because this has been a pain in the ass for the past, you know, 3 or 4 months. But
yeah,
you know,
that's a really important point to make too, because I think like depending on when you tried it the first time, even if that was just last month, you know, maybe it was last year, maybe it was 5-8 years ago. But a lot of people that tried it once and the materials are advancing so fast, honestly, like it depends on which kind of quarter in what year you did it. That'll tell you what it was even available at the time, because the materials I was using even 3 years ago, they're obsolete, you know, they're not even there anymore. So, you know, there's not going to be a 5-year study that's not 5 years out of date when all this stuff does come through the literature. But depending on when you tried it, maybe it was a product problem, maybe it was a process problem, but a lot of people that tried it, you know, even, you know, 2 years ago, have a really bad taste in their mouth from the experience with it, whether that was, you know, product or material problems or just patient unhappy with it and you're not having the flexibility to make the normal corrective actions, whether that's like a materials delamination on a repair or like shifting the teeth around to correct a problem on a try-in or whatever. So a lot of people, have tried it early on and said they'll never do it again. And what are we going to do? We've been waiting around for the entire next generation of dentists to give it another chance? No, I think we've got to like talk people into giving it another shot, because it's completely reinvented year over year.
Well,
go ahead, JB. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, there are so many inherent benefits when you can tie in the digital piece to it, that you just have to get your patients bought into that mindset, because for me and for their experience, it's so vastly superior to what we were going through with traditional dentures, and the numbers of appointments, and your wax melting halfway between here and Wisconsin. And then it gets here and you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna try to figure out where they had these teeth, or the minute I put it in, all the teeth fall, like there's so many other benefits that you can sort of capitalize on. Again, it's just marketing with your patients to help them understand that they're a part of that advancement in the process. And that in many ways, we're eliminating a lot of the other things that are horribly annoying, but they don't know anymore because they haven't experienced it, right?
Exactly. But if you play up like the front facing patient experience benefits of this technology, and that there's also some background stuff that's too technical that they'll never really understand, it really does build value. Because without fail, like I've been scanning with intraoral scanners for 13 years, and every time somebody sees me scan, which I purposely put the computer screen in front of them so they can see it actually acquiring real time, they walk out of there, they're like, wow, I've never seen that before. I'm like, how have you never seen that before? The saturation rate of scanners, I think, is like hovering right above 50% now, but still, it's still new, it's still fancy, it's still futuristic, and anything that you can produce out of it. And I tell people, hey, did you know that this denture came out of a 3D printer like is on the space station? And they're like, wow, really? That's cool. They might go home and talk about that.
So, Drew, let's talk about, I want to talk about some of the pain points for most dentists in providing this kind of care. So it's obvious that you have taken a lot of time, and that you have taken the lumps and the bumps of trying to get through this. Most dentists that want to get into this, the friction point is that most of this kind of education is corporate based. In other words, this printer company is teaching you this technique. This scanner company is teaching you this technique. But no one is really teaching the principles of digital dentistry and how to take it from A to Z, how to change that paradigm from I'm an analog dentist to how do we change analog over to digital? So where does someone go to really get that educational acumen to really understand, here's what I need to be doing, here are the things that are important in digital dentistry, and where do I go from here?
That's a great question. I do get that question all the time, so much so that I'm kind of building a new dental clinic right now, and at least half of the floor plan design is going to be geared around like being available for teaching like that, because people ask for things like that. I don't really have like a big business infrastructure set up for that, but I'd like to be able to be part of that solution, because there are CE resources, institutes, things like that you can go to. I flew all the way to Madrid back in 2016 and learned from this, amazing dentist out there, Jacopo Somoza, that really kind of reframed my understanding of how digital information actually benefits products and processes. But to push back on the corporatization of the educational process, I think that, yes, you rewind the clock 5-6 years, you did end up in a hotel room course at a conference learning specifically one product and one process that was a closed system. I think nowadays, especially most 3D printer companies, they're leaning into education because that's marketing, and education is what feeds the new customers in their direction, and they want to sell hardware and consumables. But the way that those materials are utilized, the methods that we teach are relatively open. I don't know that anything you learn at, say, a Sprint Ray course or a Formlabs course isn't applicable to literally any maybe 3D printer system. And some of the design services that are available through these various manufacturers' websites that are kind of now the digital lab online are still things you can download and print on whatever printer you have. It's still, pick and choose a la carte kind of stuff, and it's not so closed in with defined lanes anymore to one product line. So, long way of saying, a lot of times some of the more quality education is sponsored by companies that have something to sell. But as long as I think everybody's upfront about that, and ultimately, are you going to be able to do anything that you learned in that course without buying something to do it with? I mean, maybe not. Doesn't mean you have to buy that thing, but it probably means that that's an option for you to consider. And to consider zero of those options means you're not going to take anything away from that educational experience.
It's a matter of grasping concepts and understanding materials. I mean, it's taking the brand name away from it, and there's a lot of good education out there that is solely sponsored by company X or company Y or company Z, but that if you can grasp the concept, I think that it can transcend amongst other brands as well.
Drew, can you help our listeners? Because I've kind of run into this myself doing digital dentures, partnering with labs. I definitely have found myself in certain cases sort of guiding and educating the lab technician on what they can do on their end with the information that I'm providing them. And so, how do they go about either partnering with labs that are already ready to sort of help them in their journey, or equipping dentists well enough to advocate for themselves and the process that they want to try to get their current labs that they like and have good relationships with to sort of take that leap with them?
Well, I mean, it's going to be difficult depending on the size of the lab you want to partner with or work with. I mean, if you've got a really good relationship with somebody local and you can kind of, more or less talk them into buying into some technology or some materials that you want to actually use and build a case for them, then yeah, go for that. I think that's, go have a beer with somebody and talk it out kind of thing. But when it comes to, the normal gripes you hear about, I can't get good work from a laboratory, that's usually because of some sort of either communication or at least interpretation of the communication issue. And again, I always go back to the scanning and the 3D printing. That stuff can be localized, not necessarily because everybody wants to be their own lab, but because when you can communicate not with words or prescription pads, or even drawing things directly on 3D printed try-in dentures, but actually manipulate something and get a patient to look at it and say yes, you look at it and say yes, everything is actually corrected, not just noted to be corrected in the future. There's no better way to communicate with a lab other than scan something in that's perfect and say, make this exactly like this. Don't ask me any questions. Don't do anything different. Just produce this thing. So, I mean, we may, with the power of local scanning and maybe to some degree local 3D printing, at least through the means to an end, actually get from those third-party laboratory resources something that is ever more predictable and more cost-effective and profitable and more actually fun to do, because the unfun part of dentistry is having problems, especially problems where there's a contested invoice in the middle. So I didn't like those conversations either. And, my solution to that was throw every minute of every day at it and do everything myself until I figured out what parts I could actually start outsourcing again. And for the longest time, it was the final production of dentures. But now, since the machines I'm making my try-ins with are also now the machines that can produce high quality resins that the final denture can be, yeah, no big deal. It takes 20 minutes to assemble a denture after it comes off the printer.
What if, let's say that you're going to prescribe a denture tomorrow? What's your go-to material? And feel free, I mean, this show's not sponsored. Feel free to use brand names or whatever. But what's your go-to material? What's your preferential choice, for something you're going to prescribe tomorrow?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of mostly in the Sprint Ray ecosystem when it comes to 3D printed denture base and tooth materials, those high impact resins that they have. And I think there, are ultimately more generations of those resins coming out that'll be ever more aesthetic and stronger and all those things that advance seemingly every year, if not every 6 months. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I confidently call the dentures I'm printing out of Sprint Ray denture resins, final dentures that I trust should stand up to, the tests of time.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I think that's there was a question regarding that, preferred materials for 3D printed dentures. And what are your thoughts, since we're on to Sprint Ray? I mean, I'm a Sprint Ray user, Jen's a Formlabs user. What are your thoughts on printers? I mean, do you think outside of Sprint Ray and Formlabs, there's some other printers that people should be looking at, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everybody needs to be kind of looking at everything. I mean, there seems to be a delineation into two categories with 3D printers. It seems like there's the chairside printers and then there's the laboratory printers. I mean, if you're a volumetric practice or a production lab, you need to be able to print, 20 arches at once, and there are printers out there to do that. Now they cost, 6 figures, and that's not really something I can pump a billion dentures through night and day to make it pay for itself before it goes obsolete. So the chairside solutions, even though they may only print one denture at a time and maybe take, somewhere between, an hour and 20 minutes for like a DLP projector or a point tracer type laser projector or laser printer might take 2 to 3 times that. But still, even at those time scales, I can manage that. I'm maybe making one denture a day, not a big deal, right? And I can set it and run it overnight. So I think that there's always things to be paying attention to. It kind of depends on, where you want to jump in and control what and for what reason. I mean, not everybody wants to be a lab technician. Not everybody actually enjoys spending time making dentures, and I don't knock that. I actually still do enjoy it in moderation, but I don't want to be bogged down with that stuff all day either. So I've kind of found a happy medium where I can control enough of the process, and now it's economically incentivizing for me to produce that final denture when it's a simple, easy one. I just kind of control it start to finish. But pretty much every time I am, producing a 3D printed tri-end that I can then use as the ultimate communication tool back and forth between some sort of third-party laboratory. So I think, just in case I don't get to it, the reinvention of the denture process. I mean, most people are still thinking in that order of events they have from their legacy dental school education, where you have to go from some sort of initial impression or a combined master impression and then some sort of bite rim, because you still have to get a bite relationship between these arches. Even if you're a magic scanner manipulator and you actually do good scans with the scanner, how are you going to scan the bite? You still have to have something between those arches to scan across and orient them in 3D space. So ultimately, my denture process goes as follows. Patients come in, they don't really interface with me. I have a delegated diagnostic video process where people kind of growl and smile at a camera. An iPad is all I use now, and my assistant manages that. So we have like a 30-minute video taking process from which I harvest a couple of still frames that are diagnostically useful for the denture design. And so that takes all of a minute. Now they're sitting in the operatory and they take their dentures out, and my other assistant scans those dentures and hands them right back to them. I don't take out old liners. I don't try to fix anything. I don't even try to manipulate the bite in any way. I just scan them as they are, and then we database it. Then sometimes I come in there, sometimes I don't come in there. Maybe I build a little bit of rapport and say, hi, nice to meet you. Let's look at your dentures real quick. Sometimes that's not even necessary because they leave with a treatment plan for new dentures. They have a cost estimate and insurance, implications that go into that. And that's the digital consult. So they leave with information. I database some information. So once they commit to the actual new denture and maybe understand the financing of it and schedule that, then I do all the work in the background. So then I can design first a wax tri-end, and it's an actual wax tri-end where I can move the teeth around if I need to and show them something that's pink and white and natural looking. So when the patient, after that first 15-minute digital consultation, comes back in for the first hands in the mouth experience with the dentist, we do all the steps all at the same time, maybe not even in the same order. So in the course of that 1-hour appointment, we can do master impressions in custom trays if you want to, with the border molding and whatever materials you want. We can do bite recordings, and we can reset vertical dimension and find a good centric relation and actually adjust the teeth both cosmetically and functionally until the patient and me are perfectly happy with it, looking in the mirror, even testing phonetics with something that's like teeth, not just a horseshoe of pink wax. So we can get them perfectly happy in a 1 hour consolidated like clinical experience, and then I'm done. Then all that data gets scanned in and a final denture is produced. So basically it's, 2 hands in the mouth experiences, including the delivery, and then 1 delegated digital consultation that tees it all up for me so that we can work in reverse from that point forward. So that's how it makes profitability sense. But it also allows me to control things and involve my patient in the approval process in a way that I was comfortable with and they're comfortable with, and the buy-in is actually there. And I'm not spinning my wheels and having the lab reprint me 3 try-ins, rescheduling them a million times until they're actually happy with things. We get it happy that first day.
I think it's important too to highlight for our listeners that when you're able to use the scanning piece of this workflow, you can delegate. Like if you're not comfortable designing your own denture, you can delegate that to parts of your workflow that you like to have control over. You can still print an STL file in your own printer, or you can have them printed if you want, but there's so much variability, and as you're growing in your journey and kind of learning digital dentures, that you can sort of start easy. And then, eventually if you want to get into doing your own design work, or you want to print your own try-in dentures and do that, like that's the beauty of digital, is you can sort of grow with the technology to find that sweet spot that works really well for you. Just like you've sort of been experimenting over the last 5 years to sort of find that vertical sweet spot for you of things you want to delegate, things you want to keep complete control over, and then, using the technology to sort of fill in the gaps. And I when we talked about having education that's open format education, it really is, here's the flow, and you plug the pieces in of like, well, I own this technology, or did you do that? I own this piece of technology. But I don't own this yet, so I can delegate these 3 things until I have
until it makes sense that you bite off that extra piece, if ever, because you might find a lifestyle within this clinical environment that actually works for you without, obligating yourself to babysitting ever more toys in the corner. That's right. So, so I mean, I think it absolutely empowers you to pick and choose what you want to be busy with, pick and choose which, ROI bullet points you want to pursue to make the investment pay itself off. But then, you get into these open systems, a scanner, a printer, and then you can also like just start doing more and more stuff, and everything else that you figure out is useful to you just helps, make that investment make ever more sense as time marches on. I mean, just if I forget to mention it, I mean, there's a whole opportunity with some of these 3D printed crown materials that are coming out, not because they're going to immediately replace the lab or even like milled materials like zirconia and Emax and everything. But there's like this whole middle of the bell curve of people that need more than a 4 surface filling, but don't have the resources for that. And we don't think that 4 surface fillings actually will hold up sometimes. So we have this opportunity to not have to pay a lab bill, to put something in there that maybe is more robust and buys them more time and stage things out without kicking the can down the road too far and ignoring occlusal problems and collapsed vertical dimensions and things like that. But last thing I do want to get to before I lose my opportunity to plug this is my approach to pediatric dentistry. I don't know if you guys like actually ever see any children in your practices. Some people see a handful, some people see a lot, some people refuse to see any of them. My dad was a pediatric dentist, and I kind of grew up in his office, like watching that whole world work. And, I kind of went in this technological direction that's like polar opposites with that. But it just so turns out that like pediatric dentistry is like the last frontier for digital anything, right? Yeah. And why that is, it's not because they don't think it's cool or, or against it in any way. They have to work so fast on patients that if you don't work fast, they explode on you. Yeah. And so the fine tuning of the preparations and the perfect seating of a crown, the crowns don't even have margins in pediatrics, right? They're made of stainless steel for the most part, which is funny because that is an 80-year-old technology. And how many things besides dentures 5 years ago were still vestiges from the middle of last century? That is one of the last ones that still remains. I mean, they make pediatric prefabricated zirconia crowns, but guess what? they're almost impossible to fit in there because they don't bend and flex and squish into place. So nobody really futzes around with them, especially for back teeth. But in the same practice model that would never do an alloy crown on mommy because nobody wants that. Everybody gets lithium disilicate or zirconia, and those are the only two options these days. If that little Susie comes in and mommy just got a white crown, guess what Susie gets? She gets the box of metal crowns, and she gets whatever size fits best. But we have better options, and we can be a little bit more consistent to our practice branding and our promises to the public if we involve some of this technology. So we actually have like a scanner system. We call it Alpha Byte, that actually within 10 seconds of waving the scanner wand over a kid's tooth, it'll automatically tell you which zirconia prefab crown will go in there, ideally. And then it guides the preparation process in real time. It only takes 3-second follow-up scans and instantaneous feedback on the screen, so you can knock down the high spots that are hanging up the crown insertion and actually get a white crown in every kid's mouth in the same 5 minutes it takes to do a stainless steel crown. So now there's no workflow excuses anymore to actually practice 21st century pediatric dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
I also see 3D printed crowns being fantastic for children.
Huge. Yes, there's a huge world for that.
One of the things that I absolutely love to do, because basically the 3D printed crowns are hybrid resins or hybrid ceramics. One of the things that I absolutely love to do is peg laterals. I will scan them without even prepping them, and I will mill and you can also print basically a substrate or a matrix that snaps onto the teeth. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to do much characterization at all. But if nothing else, you've put it on there, you've got a scaffolding that's a perfectly molded restoration, and you can add composite to it and characterize it the way that you wanted. And so I love doing like peg laterals with it. And I can't wait until I can start printing or milling Maryland bridges with it for kids, as a temporary restoration. So there's so many opportunities for kids that are just untapped at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But you have to see it from their side, because nobody, no technology latches if it takes longer, therefore is more unprofitable, or it dampens the patient experience. It has to benefit all of those factors before it's ever going to be, adopted in any kind of scale. So it's got to, in the world of pediatrics, it can't just be a cosmetic solution that we treat the little teeth the same way we treat the big teeth with indirect dentistry. But, there's a way that we can break through and make that appeal so that the little babies out there have, better opportunities for updated care. Yeah.
Hey, time and money aside, if it's more predictable, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what, we're all talking about with the zirconia crowns or with the printed crowns or whatever. If we can make it more predictable, it's fantastic. So, thank you so much, Drew. It was such
an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Great. You're dynamic. When can we see you speak? Do you have any opportunities that coming up where you share some of this information in a more detailed fashion?
Yeah, actually, I've got there's a couple of things coming up. There's the Slagle meeting in Memphis. I'm doing a quick talk there in the morning. I think it's on that Friday. Last I looked, I think it was March 8th. And then I'm coming back to Memphis on April 11th and 12th for a thing that's sponsored by Novo Biocare. And then I've got a thing down in Little Rock put on by UAMS in May. I'll be in Honolulu in middle of April as well. If you want to join me out there, I'd love to see you there. But I'll be up in Chicago too, so I might stop by your booth.
Please
shake your hand,
come by the booth.
spend some physical time with you. Yeah,
that'd be great.
And I'm assuming you'll be at Sprint Ray's deal on Thursday.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna try to get up there Thursday morning.
Well, man, look us up. You got my cell phone number, so please look us up. But I'll close this out and just want to say thank you to Drew for just a very spirited conversation. It was fantastic. As always, digital dentistry, it definitely makes things more efficient, more predictable. It's just a matter of wrapping your head around it and being able to see the outcome. But digital makes it so much easier to see or to predict and see the outcome. So really appreciate your time, really appreciate your efforts, and look forward to seeing everybody next week. So with that, we will close out another great show and see everybody.
Have a great
next
night,
week.
guys.
Thanks,
Good to
everybody.
see everyone.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
night.
you guys. Thanks, everybody else.
Thank you, Drew.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.